believe that this was preventable?
Absolutely. This was predictable and preventable. And the only reason to be able to predict something is to prevent it and take a preeminent strike against it. And that preeminent strike shouldn't have to always be in the courts.
Yeah.
It should be healing. And that's what we saw. We did family meetings with she and her mother to try find the place of healing, find the place of moving forward, sake of the child. I did reach out at one point to Joel Osteen's church, asking for help for the mother and for intervention. As I would expect anyone to reach out to me if one of my congregants was in a situation that needed my intervention. And that's what I needed from him. I needed their team, and I don't know what they did.
Yeah.
I don't know if they were able to. And I think the tremendous guilt that any grandparent or parent feels where they haven't been able to protect a child from something so horrific has to be set aside when you're in the room with the child, so that all they feel is the hopefulness and the moving forward, that we're going to live life going out the front window, not in the rearview mirror.
Just from that was the former mother-in-law of the woman accused of opening fire at celebrity pastor Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church, talking to ABC News, saying that she thinks the shooting was, quote, predictable and preventable. Wally Carranza, who identifies herself on Facebook as a rabbi, opened up about her former daughter-in-law, Janice Moreno's mental health issues, and noted, despite the fact she had schizophrenia, she was allowed to own guns. That's an important thing to remember. That's one of several very important facts that get to the heart of why conservatives, particularly Libs of TikTok, is running in the opposite direction with this story. As we talked about in that previous article, the article mentions from her family a history of mental health issues. And as we'll see here, from CNN, shooter at Houston megachurch had lengthy criminal history, including weapons charges, police say. Not only is the history of psychiatric issues very important to this story, the other thing that's very important is a long history of criminal charges that include fraud, which, as we will see, because this shooter went under aliases for fraud that included male names, as soon as the story broke, places like Libs of TikTok and Fox News and Tim Pool ran with the story as another case of a transgender shooter shooting up a Christian church. CNN, a woman who walked into a popular Texas megachurch Sunday afternoon with a long gun and her 7-year-old son opened fire before she was killed by law enforcement officers on scene. The gunfire left the child in critical condition and another man injured, officials said. Should be noted, since it said the gunfire left the child in critical condition, that leads me to believe the child was shot in the head by police officers. That is what I gather from the way this is phrased in the way they usually report on police shootings. Authorities are now probing the shooting at televangelist and Pastor Joel Osteen's Lakewood Church, roughly 6 miles from downtown Houston. The woman, identified in search warrant as Genesee Yvonne Moreno, 36, entered the church shortly before 2 p.m. wearing a trench coat and backpack and opened fire, Houston Police Chief Troy Finner said in Sunday afternoon news conference. Officers, quote, shot and killed her in self-defense after she pointed her weapon at them, according to the search warrant released Monday by the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office. Her son was shot in the head during the shooting and remains in the hospital Monday in critical condition. Yes, that is the officer-involved shooting voice in full effect here. The officers shot the child. It sounds like. It's unclear who fired the shot that injured the child. CNN has reached out to the police for more information. I am going to go on a limb and say if the dead shooter had shot the child and there were witnesses to that, the police would have come out with that angle to the story. The police have released all of this information except who shot the child, which is mad sus. I believe the police. From what we know about how police report their own shootings and how news runs with that and runs interference for that, I'm saying police shot the child. That is my reading of it. I would be more than happy to be proven wrong. The shooting is just the latest instance of gun violence disrupting American life at places once considered safe. This was once a place of worship. Others have been at schools, grocery stores, outlet malls, hospitals, college campuses, and house parties, which, again, for those not in America, that is a normal thing to hear. Like 4 dead, 6 dead, 10 dead at shopping mall, church, grocery store is shit I've been hearing literally my entire life, and it has only gotten worse. Another problem that is not being talked about here, but we'll get to the ones that are. Shooter used a legally purchased AR-15 with a Palestine sticker on it, police said. A federal law enforcement source previously told CNN Free Palestine was written on the gun. She had a .22 caliber weapon in her bag, which was not used in the attack, according to a federal law enforcement source. And here is really the crux of the story. The linchpin that every conservative commentator did not wait for. And here's where you get into a lot of people like Tim Pool and Chaya Raichik from Libs of TikTok. They fancy themselves as these they fashion themselves really as these citizen journalists. Like they think they are delivering journalism and doing a journalism outside of the mainstream. So you're not getting the mainstream bias and press, which might be true. You're also not getting the professionalism, journalistic ethics, intelligence of people who have been doing this kind of thing for a long time. And probably most importantly in this case, know when information has been verified and when information hasn't, especially in a breaking story. The difference between somebody like Libs of TikTok and a breaking news story is, generally speaking, and this isn't always true, generally speaking, Libs of TikTok wants to get the story out as quick as possible, because the more clout she gets off of that, the more that post can spread, that's good for her. That's her business. Like, we'll go and look through Chaya's, the Libs of TikTok feed here in a second. She only posts. Like, that's what she does all day, as we will see. Portrait of a single mother with a history of mental health challenges going through the ups and downs of trying to turn her life around and launch a business. During a Monday news conference, Houston Homicide Commander Christopher Hassig said the shooter used multiple aliases, including both male and female names. Moreno was put under an order for emotional detention in 2016, and she had a mental health history documented by Houston police, Hassig said. Records from the Texas Department of Safety show Moreno had a string of arrests for minor offenses over the last 2 decades, including possession of marijuana, an assault, illegal possession of a weapon, resisting arrest, and a forgery charge. But in her 30s, she described herself on social media as the founder of a real estate and financial services firm. By her own account on social media pages, she is involved in sales of everything from new condos to shopping malls. A social media post in March 2020 shows a screenshot of a form letter from Lakewood Church thanking Moreno for her donation. Like at this point, she had already had a history of mental health issues documented by the state. And nobody did anything for this person. Nobody looked at her history and said, this person needs actual help. They are not going to be cured by a 2-day stay in prison. They're not going to be aided by Texas's ridiculously lax gun laws that I'm assuming is how she was able to go out and get an AR-15. I'm pretty sure it was an AR-15. Yeah, AR-15. Legally purchased AR-15 for somebody with a criminal history and a long history of mental health issues. According to police, there was some sort of family dispute between the shooter and her ex-husband and ex-husband's family, some of whom are Jewish. This might possibly be where all this stems from, and this is apocryphal from the police. Said police also found anti-Semitic writings connected with the shooter. Maybe there's a connection to the Palestine sticker, anti-Semitic writings, like that might be a hint. But thus far, it's not, this doesn't seem like an issue with trans people, right? You'd be surprised, according to Libs of TikTok and Chaya Raichik, who, by the way, these are still up. These posts that she posted are still up. Breaking. This is from yesterday. No, this is from 2 days ago in the morning. 2 days. 2 days of people telling her that this information isn't accurate, that it's not verified, that it's not correct. Other news sources going back and rectifying and correcting themselves. Fox News did it. They did it very quietly. But Libs of TikTok still has up. Breaking. The Lakewood shooter was transgender. He went by the name Janess and previously Jeffrey. Another act of trans terrorism. We need to have a national conversation about the LGBTQ movement turning youth into violent extremists. Couple things there. One, she wasn't a youth at all. Two, we already talked about, again, this is where, for Chaya, not having any scruples, not having any experience or reliability as a journalist, kind of is making her look like an idiot to anybody who does observe those things. And let's go to the Independent, and then we'll look at the Advocate really quick, because what we're going to do is I want to go into showing how, from Libs of TikTok, this spread throughout the conservative sphere, many of whom have not recanted at all any of the things they've said. Because for so many conservatives in this space, it's about getting a take out there that will take off and get spread and get them more followers and get them more subscribers and just essentially do it to get more money. They don't care if it's actually wrong. And when it's pointed out to them, again, because they don't have journalistic principles or training, they don't go through any effort to edit or change it. They just leave it there for others to latch onto later. Conservative pundits, activists, and politicians have continued to spread the unfounded claim that the Lakewood church shooter was a transgender woman, even after it was kiboshed by police. Again, this was based on Libs of TikTok. Her rationale was previously used aliases that were part of fraud. That's where all of this comes from. Houston police said in a press conference on Monday that although Moreno had sometimes gone by alias Jeffrey Escalante, their investigations so far have found no evidence she ever identified as any gender other than female. But that did not stop conservative crusader Chris Rufo, anti-LGBT activist Chaya Raichik, Donald Trump Jr., and even Texas Senator Ted Cruz from latching onto the idea. Quote, per capita, violent trans extremists have to become the most violent group of people anywhere in the world. That is a terrible sentence. Have to have become the most violent group of people anywhere in the world, said John Jr. on X, formerly Twitter. Mrs. Raichik, who runs the Lib of TikTok account on X, has continued to call Morena a, quote, trans terrorist without offering any evidence, even as she posted clips of other portions of Monday's press conference. So she is cutting around that press conference. On Tuesday afternoon, nearly 12 hours after that briefing debunked the claims, Ted Cruz shared one of Ms. Raichik's posts with an emoji of a man covering his face with one hand. The claim appears to have originated from the left-leaning broadcaster MSNBC, which claimed on Monday morning before the press conference that Morena was a Hispanic transgender woman. Because of this, Fox News followed that up with a headline. Both outlets have now nixed that claim. Ari Drennan, head of LGBT plus news for the left-wing think tank Media Matters for America, who first noted that NBC News Connection, said Ms. Raichik and company were, quote, adding fuel to a moral panic as legislators across the country push a raft of laws restricting the lives of trans people. And Ari, I couldn't have put it better myself, because that is, without a doubt, Chaya's end goal, as we'll see. Because we're going to get into not just how it's spread, but also why she keeps doing this. This isn't the first time she's done this. Amid increasing paranoia and violent rhetoric targeting trans people, right-wing activists and influencers have seized on a number of recent shootings in which the alleged perpetrators appeared to be trans or non-binary as evidence that the trans community is uniquely violent. The modern trans movement is radicalizing activists into terrorists, wrote Benny Johnson, a conservative YouTuber previously fired from BuzzFeed for plagiarism. Oh, that's shady. I love that. Independent, after the 2023 Nashville shooting. This is happening a lot. Something is deeply wrong, said Elon Musk, noted dipshit and richest person in the world and owner of X, who has become increasingly critical of trans rights since his own child transitioned. Data does not, data does not support the idea that trans people commit more mass shootings than others, according to a Reuters analysis last year. There have been just 4 shootings recently where there was clear evidence that a perpetrator was transgender or considering transition: in Aberdeen, Maryland in 2018, in Denver, Colorado in 2019, in Nashville, Tennessee in 2023, and in Iowa in January 2024. The 2022 Colorado Springs shooting at an LGBT nightclub has also been listed by conservatives because the shooter, Anderson Lee Aldrich, has said since their arrest they identify as non-binary. However, prosecutors have said there is zero evidence that they identified that way before the shooting and found they actually exhibited extreme hatred for LGBT plus people. And we've talked about that. That's just extreme trolling. Like he's already in prison. He's already going to jail forever. What does he have to lose by causing more issues for queer people? In any case, the Gun Violence Archive lists more than 44,000 mass shootings in the U.S. since 2013. Some of them had more than one perpetrator. Of those, less than 10 were known to be transgender as of last March, representing 0.11% of the whole. That's 0.11%. So let's go over to The Advocate. Fox News and GOP politicians falsely claim Lakewood shooter was trans. Quote, our shooter is identified by a driver's license as Genesee Moreno, 36-year-old Hispanic female, Hasek said. She has utilized both male and female names, but through all of our investigation to this point, she has identified this entire time as female. Finner later clarified, quote, it's the biological mother, referring to the critically injured 7-year-old boy who was shot in the head. The incident has been a magnet for misinformation, notably propagated by far-right figures on social media. U.S. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, a Republican from Georgia, contributed to the confusion with a post on X, making unfounded claims about the shooter's identity and motivations. Quote, not only was the shooter a trans from El Salvador, she also had a gun engraved with Free Palestine, but investigators can't say if she was politically motivated or not. When this country starts being truthful, regardless of whose feelings get hurt, we will solve many problems, which is a hysterical thing to say about telling the truth and solving problems when this is somebody who was basically just completely underserved by our mental health care in America. Like, the truth, if you want to go into the truth behind this, it's that this is somebody who shouldn't have had as easy access to guns as Texas wants for everybody. Like, this is somebody who should have had dedicated mental health care given to her, because she had a history, a criminal record that indicated she needed health care. Like, that's the truth. Has nothing to do with being trans or hurting other people's feelings. However, it's very funny that MTG wants to say, oh, a trans illegal immigrant who loves Palestine, we gotta be able to stand up to these people. Republican Missouri Senators Josh Hawley also perpetuated the falsehood that the shooter was trans. So the Lakewood shooter was a transgender, pro-Palestine radical. We need a full hate crimes investigation, including the influences on the shooter's motivation, plans, and thinking, he wrote. Again, very funny. They won't look into just like the fact that she's able to just buy guns so easily. Like that never comes into the equation here. Like, and only when they're sure, because it's a trans person, that it has to be a radical leftist. That's the only time they'll really, you notice that. Let's look into their motivations. Let's look into their inspirations. If it's somebody who has like a manifesto about, white replacement theory, thoughts and prayers, better not look into it too much. Because now we've seen how it's spread. We've seen since Libs of TikTok, and Libs of TikTok, this is a massive account. This is probably one of the biggest accounts on X. 2.8 million subscribers. Or followers. 2.8 million followers. It is followed by Donald Trump Jr., Marjorie Taylor Greene, Elon Musk, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley. All people, all super prominent figures in current right-wing movements. All people who retweeted or shared this story. This interpretation of it. So what does that do to a narrative? All we really have to do to find out is go down into the comments. Because do you think, like honestly, do you think the people in this comment section are going to go and look for any mainstream news sources? Are they going to go to MSNBC? Are they going to go to Fox News to try and find something that might dispel their narrative or challenge it or add additional context? Or do you think that they look at something like this and see all the facts they need? I'm betting it's the former. If there's a manifesto for this one, it won't be released because it would contain everything you expect it to, just like in Nashville. We talked about how the Nashville shooter's writings were just like absolutely incoherent, and also how the narrative around that shooter completely changed. I have a video stream highlights up on it, how Steven Crowder and Matt Walsh totally changed their tune once the manifesto actually came out from what they said at the beginning. Why is his race white? Again, they're misgendering somebody who's not transgender. They're just misgendering a cis woman. Why do we keep letting people out of prison with super long rap sheets? Ooh, you're so close to getting it. They were told being transgender, their life will be full of happiness and they will see all their dreams come true. The conspiracy theory that has alerted our world. Controversial group behind Trans Day of Vengeance raised money for firearms training as other trans protesters posed with guns ahead of march in DC on Saturday. Oh, they have Elena. Based. Okay. I don't see people fear-mongering when it's militias doing this shit. When it's just good old boys dressing up in camo and being weekend warriors. Wonder why. Ads for PragerU. God, this place sucks. And here we see. Remember we were talking about Colorado Springs identified as non-binary? Liar. Uvalde shooter identified as trans. I don't think that's correct at all. I think that's just a literal lie. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah. Trans woman's photo used to spread baseless online theory about Texas shooter. So this was a couple years ago now, 2022. But again, do you see any pushback here? Aside from trans activists, trans people, you don't see anybody trying to correct these narratives. Another gender-confused person. They are dangerous individuals. They belong in a mental home. 97 likes. That is really the mindset that Chaya Raichik wants to push. I've seen news reports calling it a biological female. Very confusing. But not really, you're just being lied to. How is that thing considered a white, non-Hispanic female? Notice, this is a cis woman that these people have been told is trans, so they immediately dehumanize her. A dead woman. They call it a thing, an it, because that's what they think is okay. That is the kind of rhetoric that Chaya pushes. And this is where the shit really spreads. Because it's one thing to look at and we could go into a dozen comment sections that are going to be just like this, full of hundreds of comments just like this. Because these people are looking for confirmation bias. And Chaya is giving it to them. Here, this is Elena, I forget her last name off the top of my head. McLaughlin? She follows me. Either way, this is straight up fake. This is not from a trans person. All of this that was written, fake. It's just somebody else's picture. And again, we have over in the comments, people who believe it wholeheartedly without even batting an eye. I am armed whenever I leave the house. That's nothing bad will happen there. Would you introduce this to mom? Yeah. Again, like people, it's like they see something. First off, this is ridiculously worded. Christ cuck. Slam dunk a Christ cuck baby into the trash can. Like it's clearly a troll, and yet still they are arguing like it's a serious thing. And again, we saw this. This is at least half of them are not true. The list keeps growing. Oh, how trolls gay. Great. Deport every illegal alien. Great. Wokeness has made people mentally sick. The 1776 Project. Fraud. So it goes like this forever. Like it just keeps going and it keeps spreading. She wants violent sentiment against trans people. And you can tell because multiple times she has had people tell her, ask her, interview her, saying, hey, people call you a stochastic terrorist because after you point stuff out. After you target people online, those people get death threats, bomb threats, doxxed, have to move, get stalked. Do you think you might want to stop it all? To which she basically shirks all blame and any responsibility and says, well, I'm just holding up a mirror to the degenerate liberal leftists and they don't like that. It's like, okay, but you're not answering the question. First off, you're not really holding up a mirror. You're just retweeting their videos and stuff that are already publicly available. And most importantly, you never seem to, Chaya, try and dissuade people from notions of violence. The people in your comments saying, we all need to get armed. The people in your comments saying every trans person is a degenerate with a mental disease. Even when it's a lie. Because that is her grift. That is what she wants to happen. From NBC News, after Libs of TikTok posted, at least 21 bomb threats followed. The FBI and local law enforcement said bomb threats across the country have tied up government resources even when they turn out to be hoaxes. February 7th, 2024. That's this year. And as I've talked about in previous videos, this is not the first incident of Chaya pointing something out, and it ends with bomb threats. Last March, police in Coralville, Iowa, investigated a bomb threat targeting a junior high school. Authorities brought in specially trained dogs to sniff for explosives and started looking into why someone might try to target the community's teachers and students. Law enforcement quickly determined that the threat was a hoax. Detective Hannah Dvorak from the Coralville Police Department arrived at a theory. Quote, it appears this all stems from a post made earlier this week by Chaya Rychik and her Libs of TikTok account, Dvorak wrote in a report to her superiors. Rychik, 29, is not accused of making any bomb threats in Iowa or anywhere else. But about a day and a half before authorities responded to the threat, Rychik posted that the school offers a, quote, pornographic book in its library that, quote, teaches kids about gay sex. These are the books they're giving your kids to read in school, she wrote on the social media platform X. People have frequently targeted the book in question, This Book is Gay, a coming out guide for LGBTQ teens, with book bans going back years. The Coralville detective wrote in her report that one of Rychik's supporters could have had a role in the bomb threat. And here's really where it all spreads from, because there is no end to people who are brought up on charges, who are they are investigated and it is found they have direct ties to supporting Libs of TikTok, to being inspired by Chaya Rychik. Threatening shootings, threatening bombs against schools, hospitals, doctors, activists. The list goes on. As we'll see here, Coralville was not alone. Going back to the NBC News article, officers and government officials in 4 other jurisdictions, Burbank, California, Minnetonka, Minnesota, Oklahoma City, and Tualatin, Oregon, told NBC News they believe Rychik sparked threats in their localities with her posts on social media that digitally heckle people such as drag performers, LGBTQ teachers, and doctors who treat transgender patients. The name Libs of TikTok is a reference to the people Rychik mocks on social media, Libs being short for liberal. NBC News identified 33 incidences. Jeez, what's that? That's not a word. NBC News identified 33 instances, starting in November 2020, when people or institutions singled out by Libs of TikTok later reported bomb threats or other violent intimidation. The threats, which on average came several days after tweets from Libs of TikTok, targeted schools, libraries, hospitals, small businesses, and elected officials in 16 states, Washington, D.C., and the Canadian province of Ontario. 21 of the 33 threats were bomb threats, which most commonly targeted schools and were made via email. While I think a lot of people would take the opportunity to try and set the record straight or run interference or something, Chaya knows she doesn't need to. That's one of the more insidious things about the schism that has been brought about by distrusting fake news, by distrusting mainstream news journalism, is that she knows that she doesn't have anything to gain by trying to clear her name to a wider audience. Because as we were seeing earlier, she already has a built-in audience of people who are ready to hate trans people, who are ready to dehumanize them at a moment's notice, who are going to be there to support her and spread her conspiracies. Back to the article, she did not respond directly, but said in a post on X that NBC News was working on a, quote, hit piece. Quote, they do it to try to paint me as an extremist to discredit me. This bomb threat narrative is really getting old, she wrote, adding a yawning face emoji. Do you think... Like, I can't tell if she seriously has no, like, internal monologue. Like, I doubt she has what most people would call a conscience that makes her stop and, like, think, God, is what I'm doing actually a good thing? I don't think she has that. I think she is too blinded by the limited, because here's the other thing. Let's go back into, let's go back into a little bit. We'll go into Chaya Raichik's history in a second, because if you don't know, Chaya Raichik has been desperate for a spotlight. Desperate to do something that requires her to not actually work a job for her entire adult life. An account in search of a voice and a big break from Joe Rogan. This is from Taylor Loren's Washington Post write-up. Chaya Raichik had been working as a real estate salesperson in Brooklyn when, in early November 2020, she created an account that would eventually become Libs of TikTok. Under her first channel, Chaya, a bunch of numbers, she minimized COVID, cast doubt on election results, and promoted a dubious story about a child sex trafficking ring. On November 23rd, 2020, Raichik changed handles, this time going by Chaya Ray, and identifying herself publicly as a real estate investor in Brooklyn. She began doubling down on election fraud conspiracies using QAnon-related language. Earlier that December, she joked about launching a clothing line titled "Voter Fraud is Real." Later that month, Raichik cycled through 2 more Twitter names, this time focusing on state politicians, first under the handle Chaya Raichik and the display name Chaya Raichik, and then under the new handle Cuomo must go. She railed against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, calling for him to resign. She promoted the efforts to recall Governor Gavin Newsom. She also began posting about Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, calling him, quote, actually brilliant, which is very funny. By early last March, she pivoted to a parody account titled Houseplant POTUS, pretending to tweet as if she was a houseplant living with President Biden. She revamped her avatar to look like a small shrub with Biden's face on the leaves. At that point in time, she also claimed to be proudly Orthodox Jewish, live in Brooklyn, and work in real estate in her Twitter bio. So here we already see she has been taken in by the right-wing content sphere and is desperate to get some of that clout for shilling almost anything. And when it doesn't work out, she just pivots to something else. She just pivots to another gimmick account of some shape. Whether it's a politician that's popular or unpopular at the time, whether it's a dumbass gimmick account from the Washington Post article, but the houseplant parody never took off. On April 19, 2021, she pivoted her account once again, this time to Libs of TikTok. Just 4 months after getting started, TikTok got its big break. Joe Rogan started promoting the account to millions of listeners in his hit podcast. He mentioned it several times on the show in August, then again in late September. Libs of TikTok is one of the greatest fucking accounts of all time, he said. With the seal of approval, Raichik's following skyrocketed. By January, Raichik's page was leaning hard into groomer discourse, calling for any teacher who comes out as gay to be fired on the spot. Her anti-trans tweets went especially viral. She called on her followers to contract schools that were allowing, quote, boys in the girls' bathroom, and pushed the false conspiracy theory that schools were installing litter boxes. That being gender nonconforming or an ally to LGBTQ plus community is a, quote, mental illness, and referred to schools as, quote, government-run indoctrination camps for the LGBTQ plus community. By March, Libs of TikTok was directly impacting legislation. DeSantis' press secretary, Christina Pushaw, credited the account with, quote, opening her eyes and informing her views on the state's restrictive legislation that bans discussion of sexuality or gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade, referred to by critics as the Don't Say Gay bill. She and Libs of TikTok have interacted with each other at least 138 times publicly, according to a report by Media Matters. When asked by the Post about her relationship with the account, Pasha wrote, quote, I follow, like, and retweet Libs of TikTok. My interactions with the account are public, and added that she's a strong supporter of its mission. I don't do this for money or fame, Raichik told the New York Post, which, like all other outlets interviewing her, allowed her to speak on the condition of anonymity. In February, while comparing herself to Project Veritas. Project Veritas, by the way, may be one of the worst conservative organizations you could compare yourself to. An organization literally built on lies. Like, literally built on sting operations that force people into compromising appearing positions so they can lie about them. Like, Project Veritas is ridiculous. Maybe we'll talk about them one day. James O'Keefe. I'm not some politician or blue check journalist. Damn straight. I feel like there are so many small stories that are so important that aren't getting out, and that's what I'm here for. In another anonymous interview, she claims to have left New York for somewhere in California, recently turning the account into a full-time job. For a while, she was soliciting donations through Venmo. But Libs of TikTok continues to amass followers across the internet. It has more than 65,000 followers on Instagram, nearly 10,000 on YouTube, and a robust presence on right-wing YouTube competitor Rumble. Mind you, she's getting revenue on all of these sites. Like, and with numbers trickling down from Twitter, like 2.3 million, probably pretty good money. Probably, like, I'm just saying, probably pretty good money. So before this grift, she was a mid-20-something real estate agent, which is, come on now, a grift in and of itself. Yeah, and Luna Seon, she gets big money from backers now. Bloody Shrine. Do these people have their hearts in what they do you think? I don't think... I think Chaya vaguely does, because I think she has been riding the right-wing grift train for long enough that I think she really, like, believes in QAnon, and, like her asserting Project Veritas, like, from her background and everything, it paints a picture, which is not too far off, of somebody who grew up in a very privileged upbringing, who didn't really have to work for much through her life, and who wants to, this is her version of, like, making a difference in the world. Yeah, I think people like her are, like, have their heart in it to a degree. People like Matt Walsh, to a degree. I think certainly Matt Walsh. But other people like Candace Owens, no, I don't really think so. Like, this is her big break. Like, she literally can't do anything else. And if you've ever listened to her, like, interviews and stuff, she's not a particularly articulate person. Like, she is not, her ideology is not well-founded or well-researched. Like, she's not going to be like a Ben Shapiro, like, debate me type. She's just not about that life. She is comfortable from behind a keyboard, from behind a phone, getting donations from people, and pointing hate at others and being a stochastic terrorist. And that's really her game. And that is really all she wants to do. Yeah, no, Mockingbird, she just finds lolcows and neurodivergent people and makes fun of them. Yeah, like, exactly. Like, she... And you'll notice this if you go through her profile long enough, is she will pick out, like, the most obscure... Like, people on TikTok who have less than 100 followers. Like, 10, 20, 30 followers. Who are just, like, maybe a little bit weird. Or maybe a little bit eccentric. Like, young teenagers who have weird neo-pronouns, or like just things that the mainstream conservative America would look at and discuss. And she doesn't care about what happens to those people, because that to her is content. Those are not people who have lives, who have egos, who have, internal thoughts, monologues, feelings about things. Those are pieces of content. Those are morsels for her to throw to her ravenous fans. And that's how she treats it. That is her job. Like, she is the person in Jurassic Park that lowers the goat or lowers the cow into the raptor pen. Like, she doesn't feel anything for the cow, because she just sees it as literally her job to spread hatred. And she has no desire, as we saw earlier, she has no desire to stop that hatred from spreading. And will continue to spread it even if it is a blatant lie.